BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. Now, you'll see here that this is another Zodiac Killer upload today, and I would just like to say the way you can support this channel is not with money. Instead, it is by checking out some of our other uploads. I know there's some people that tune in only to hear about the Zodiac Killer. Right now, I would say please check out our series on the Casey Anthony trial. We have a 3-part playlist that'll be included here that you can check out. I mean, not asking for any money. There's no Patreon with a channel this small. The only way you can support us is just check out some other subjects, and we have all kinds of cases going up and down the spectrum. But once again, there's a link posted to our playlist on the Casey Anthony trial, and I'm sure that you probably have a few things to say about that one, so feel free to look at that one, listen, leave some comments below. Moving on to the next thing. We have chosen the next book for our Zodiac Killer book discussion, and we are going to be doing Time 17 by Gareth Penn. I found a copy online, and I really didn't want to just go to some sort of pirating site that's just going to pull something out. I found something that had been uploaded on Zodiac Killer ciphers, and I think it's very valuable. I mean, I just don't want to rip people off or anything, if you know what I mean. I think instead, I would rather just go about it in some way where we can just have a discussion, and I'm sure Gareth Penn would want to get his message out there, so I would believe anyway. Now on to today's discussion here. We're going to have a few uploads that are coming out rather quickly, because I wanted to do a series in response to the Netflix docudrama Tiger King. I mean, really, it's a documentary series, Tiger King, which is all about Joe Exotic, so we're going to be having those coming out, but I also wanted to keep up with the other things that I had planned to discuss, and that is the Zodiac Killer Q&A. In the past on this channel, we used to do Q&As where I would read off your questions and comments, and we would have a little bit of a discussion. Our first comment comes to us from Mike M. on the Earl Van Best upload. Appreciate your coverage of this book, referring to The Most Dangerous Animal of All by Gary L. Stewart. It seems that it works only as a piece of fiction. Mr. Stewart has a fine imagination, but as you state, there is a serious lack of real evidence. Thank you for your work. I always enjoy your analysis. Hey, Mike, thank you so much for the positive words. But yes, when it comes to our book discussion on Earl Van Best Jr. and the Zodiac Killer, what I have to say is, if I just had to stand by the original claim that Gary Stewart just took the Zodiac letters, as well as Robert Graysmith's narrative, pulled out the word Zodiac Killer and inserted Earl Van Best Jr. in place of that. So there really wasn't too much we could do about that, and I think that Mike's comment right there sums it up very well. But when we want to look at some other suspects, we are going to get to some comments as well from our recent series on Thomas Henry Horan, for sure. He talks about having multiple people involved with the Zodiac Killer murders. And when I was interviewing Thomas Henry Horan, and I was really trying to push him on those things, what I really just got from him is like, he has a very solid response to many of the challenge questions that I proposed during the interview. For example, you would say something like, you're talking about multiple killers operating. Why not just say that Hal Snook, his prime suspect for the letter writing, was the Zodiac Killer? And his response was, well, the evidence doesn't seem to support that. Then we talked about the possibility that, well, just why do you say that there were multiple people? Why not just say that there was a single perpetrator involved with the Zodiac Killer? And then his response was, well, the evidence doesn't seem to support it. And we couldn't really get too much further on any of those questions there. Now moving on to our upload from Zodiac Killer, Sherry Jo Bates Letters and Symbols. So, some of the comments here, that I can see people really had a lot of things to say. This one comes to us from Richard Grinnell, and he is talking about the Sherry Jo Bates letters. At the bottom of some of the letters that were mailed after the murder of Sherry Jo Bates in Riverside, California, 1966, someone sent letters that said, Bates had to die. There will be more. And they signed it with the letter Z, or possibly it's the 32, and even though we just said it's a work of fiction, Gary Stewart's book about Earl Van Best Jr. says that it's the letters E and V put together for Earl and Van Best. But if you're going to talk about Sherry Jo Bates is murdered, some letters are mailed after her murder, and they're signed with a 32, Richard Grinnell says, Although I don't subscribe to the idea, some Arthur Lee Allen advocates will point out that the number 32 as Allen's address in Vallejo, 32 Fresno Street. Okay, I mean, I really give him a big thank you for that, because I was talking about, well, what would be the significance of the number 32? And he did provide something. All I got to say about that one is the number 23. Look to the movie with Jim Carrey. Look to the 23 phenomenon. You can achieve that type of connection with the proper cleverness. That's kind of the big challenge to some things like the number 23 about being obsessed with a number, as well as this. I think it's very good to know that there is a connection between Arthur Lee Allen and the number 32, if it indeed that the letters were signed with a 32 and not a Z. But what I would say in response to that is, Bates had to die. There will be more. Oh, yeah, by the way, I live at 32 Fresno Street. Crazier things have happened, but I'm really glad to get that piece of information. And this is one of the best things about the comments section, where you guys really contribute some facts and ideas and insights. I think that it's very valuable. Now, our next one is coming to us from Postmark. And Postmark was the person who actually first suggested that I invite Thomas Henry Horan onto the show. Thank you so much. And what we have here is, I agree with so much of your take on Thomas Horan's Zodiac hoax theory. Too many people dismiss it entirely, but it is quite smart. While I don't think this theory holds up in the end, it got me looking at the case in a new and different way and posed some good questions. The comment goes on, but first I would interject by saying, yes, absolutely. I think that it's raising a lot of good questions. And some of the later parts of our interview with Thomas Horan, and if you ever go back and listen to that, I would highly recommend you listen to our upload, Zodiac, Thomas Horan Answers All Questions, Part 3, because you'll even see that he gives the possibility that this could be tied into the Manson murders, the Zebra murders, Son of Sam, MK Ultra, and some people were leaving some comments as well saying they're just not 100% sure if all of these things are genuinely connected. They're thinking that it's getting too conspiratorial at that point. But it definitely gets you to think about the case in a different way. We had more or less been asking questions about the group murder theory in the past, meaning just that there were multiple perpetrators involved. And this is an umbrella term that we use. Even other things like the multiple killers theory, the Zodiac hoax theory would all be included in that group murder theory. We had more questions, and I think Thomas Henry Horan actually put it out with much more finesse. But, he is a professional writer, and he's written 3 books on the subject, whereas I have not. But to continue onward with the comment from Postmark, much like you have done, I am so tempted to suggest that you have him on. That's some of the things that we said from the beginning. You are friendlier to others to his theory. Hey, thank you. Yet remain unconvinced. You could discuss some of the finer points together. On the other hand, Thomas Horan seems so personally invested in his theory that he may not be open to considering its flaws. I am skeptical that he'd be free to shoot the shit like you do and just speculate without committing necessarily to a particular theory. I enjoy your style of podcast, but wonder if you would consider having Horan on. And once again, thank you for the positive words. And as you see there, though, we did bring Thomas Horan on, and it was a huge success. He was very willing to talk to me. But about the committal, if there's that word, committal, about being committed to the theory, I am always reminded of the 6-part miniseries that they did on O.J. Simpson that was produced by Martin Sheen, where they followed the William Deere theory in the O.J. Simpson case, that the O.J. Simpson trial is completely wrong. The murders of Nicole Brown Simpson and Ronald Goldman were committed by Jason Simpson. That's the theory of William Deere, former investigator. And, he's written multiple books about the subject, although it's kind of just a repackaging of the first book. And the documentary was called O.J. is Guilty, but Not of Murder. The book got repackaged as O.J. is Innocent and I Can Prove It. They did the 6-part miniseries. And at the end, they gave a devastating takedown of William Deere's theory. And I just began to wonder, wouldn't it be great if we could have not even 6 parts, but even just a program like that would bring forward the Zodiac Killer hoax theory? I'm sure the History Channel would be all over something like that. They like to talk about the Zodiac Killer. Or even if you're going to get somebody like Martin Sheen, someone who has money to go after this one, because a lot of people are just very curious about this. Let's get Jake Gyllenhaal to produce it or something, to actually get investigators together and give the very intense challenges to something like the Zodiac Killer hoax theory. And we can see how that goes, because, I mean, of course, somebody like Thomas Horan would want exposure for his theory and exposure for his books and to show what he has done, as well as other people who disagree with him could actually challenge this. And for us in the audience, we just want to know the truth. So once again, thank you for those comments there. Now we're going to be moving on to some of our earlier uploads. I mean, sort of our more recent ones. And this is going to come to us from our promo piece on the new Zodiac documentary, Obsession into Darkness. Once again, I didn't really say too many critical things about that because I was one of the contributors in that film. Highly recommend you check that out on Zodiac Killer channel. That's just the name of the channel, Zodiac Killer. The documentary's Obsession into Darkness. Just give it a watch and let us know what you think. Overall, though, good time working on that film. And our next comment is coming to us from Jamie Hendrickson. And first and foremost, I can say that Jamie has left some very insightful comments on all of the Zodiac uploads up and down that we've done over the last 3 years. He has done a lot of research on the case, and if you ever see any of his comments, once again, YouTube user Jamie Hendrickson, he just has a lot of research and time that he has put into this, and he dropped some very insightful things. Thomas Horan never actually stated why he thought Dennis Land is a good suspect. Wouldn't Brian Hartnell have easily identified Land as the killer when Land found him on the road by his voice? And this is talking about the Lake Berryessa stabbing. Thomas Horan's prime suspect in this is Dennis Land, who was an associate of Hal Snook, who Horan says wrote the letters, as we said, and that Dennis Land committed the Lake Berryessa stabbing. Dennis Land was a park ranger in the area, and it's possible he was a serial killer himself. Now, why does Thomas Horan think that Dennis Land is the perpetrator of the Lake Berryessa stabbing, the stabbing of Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Ann Shepard? Cecilia Shepard passed away 2 days later in the hospital, and Brian Hartnell, of course, survived. One of the things that I did not read in Thomas Horan's book, The Great Zodiac Killer Hoax of 1986, I repeat, I did not read this. I heard him say it in another interview, was that when Brian Hartnell first saw Dennis Land coming to rescue him, he said that he thought the Zodiac Killer had come back. And, that's one of the reasons why Horan states that. I'm not sure where he got that from, but once again, that's not from the book. I heard him say that in an interview. And the reasons that I replied about why Dennis Land could be the perpetrator of Lake Berryessa, so Thomas Horan had told to me anyway, is that the police were investigating him for the murder. It's possible that Dennis Land murdered other people. He was a friend and associate of Hal Snook. And about why didn't he recognize Dennis Land's voice? By he, I mean Brian Hartnell. That is an excellent question. I mean, this guy would have had to been disguising his voice like crazy. I mean, to not only have a 4-second exchange with somebody, it's not like he just said, tie her up. No, he had a conversation with the person. And in the Thomas Horan theory, if I understand correctly, Dennis Land would have put on the Zodiac Killer hood with the symbol on the front, committed the Lake Berryessa stabbing. He's having this conversation with Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, then leaves for 30 minutes, changes his clothes, gets cleaned up, and then comes back, and he is the first person on the scene. Something else that Thomas Horan said in the interview was that if it were not for the murder of Paul Stein and the Zodiac taking credit for that, and Dennis Land having an alibi for the murder of Paul Stein, he would likely have been arrested for the murder of Cecilia Ann Shepard. But then Jamie has responded by saying, I have never seen any proof that Dennis Land was investigated for any murder, much less Lake Berryessa. So, I mean, I really got to tell you, Thomas Horan didn't write that in the first part of his book, and now the books are together, The Myth of the Zodiac Killer. The things that I was just telling you, he said during our interview, and I've heard him say in interviews in the past, I'm not exactly sure the exact source of everything that he's getting from. Of course, she says he gets this from the case file, but very, very good comment from Jamie. It's really good that we can kind of press some things on those types of details. And I mean, I really don't want to be completely bogged down on the Zodiac Killer hoax theory, because as Postmark wrote out, it's like, we're not talking about committing to only one single theory. It's just that we really want to look at some other possibilities, and we want to know a little bit more about just what happened. And I think that it's a good way to do it, and it's more about thinking in a different way. Now, our next comment comes to us from Super Strike 9, and this is on our upload about Arthur Lee Allen that we put out a couple months ago. Body size wise, I think that Arthur Lee Allen resembles the Lake Berryessa sketch. I don't think he is the Zodiac Killer, though. Well, what I can say about that is, I think there are conflicting descriptions of the Zodiac's body type. I think there are conflicting descriptions just about the Zodiac's physical appearance. When you look at the composite sketch, I mean, I don't think that looks anything like Arthur Lee Allen. He has a much wider neck. He has a much wider jawline. I really am not very well convinced of that. But, like at Lake Berryessa, you do have someone who seems a little bit bulkier than some of the other perpetrators out there, or some of the, when I say perpetrators, I mean some of the other physical descriptions of the Zodiac Killer. Now, when it comes to Arthur Lee Allen, I was thinking about one thing recently. I did an upload called Zodiac Killer Solved, 13-letter cipher, and we are, of course, looking at a possibility, and it's just a possibility of the Z13 cipher. And we were talking about Lyndon Lafferty and his explanation for it, about if you put the letters in a certain way, it says GRT, and then there's two things that I call the two butt cheeks or something like that, and I found a way to rearrange the letters of the Z13, and I got Allen, Zodiac, Know My Name. Do I believe that Arthur Lee Allen is the Zodiac Killer? Not really. Do I believe that it's very easy for the evidence to come back to him? Yeah, I do. I do think it's very easy for the evidence to come back to Arthur Lee Allen, and I'm not 100% sure what happened. I can really see, though, it seems like I can almost accept Thomas Henry Horan when he says that the narrative against Arthur Lee Allen was fabricated, because you see, it's like there are so many things that contradict all the positive points for Arthur Lee Allen being the Zodiac Killer. You have the pros and the cons, and they just don't necessarily match up too much. Now, we do also have the Corey Starliper solution to the Zodiac Killer cipher. And this is to the 340 cipher, which apparently has never been cracked. A lot of the explanations about why the 340 has never been solved is that it is simply something that was never meant to have been solved. It's meaningless. It's gibberish. It could be written in a different language. Now, next one comes to us from Barry Flintoff, who says that, in all honesty, I would have been more impressed if the person who had solved the 340 cipher to get Arthur Lee Allen had never heard the name Arthur Lee Allen before and then found it in the cipher. And to give a little bit of context, the Corey Starliper solution ends with, "My name is Lee Allen." That's the final line. I don't know. I told you I could rearrange the Zodiac Z13 to get Allen, Zodiac, Know My Name. It's possible that we can probably get Arthur Lee Allen's name to come out very easily, whereas Gaikowski would be a little bit more difficult to extract from some of these things. But maybe you could find Gaik in the cipher more easily. All right, well, I would really like to know what everybody has to say about this. Not only the Zodiac hoax theory, I want to play this from a variety of angles. What do you think about anything that we have said here? You can drop some comments below. Thank you if you've listened to the end of this one. And once again, please check out some of our other uploads on the channel. We got the Tiger King series going on, as well as our Casey Anthony playlist that you can find here. All right, thank you guys all so much for checking out this upload and the Zodiac Killer, talking about it with you guys. It's been great. Until next time.